Welcome, everybody. So, without more ado, I'll introduce Ken Otter. Ken is a canal enthusiast who hasn't previously been directly connected with waterways. But he has a big advantage in that he lives within sight of the Stamford Canal at Tallington in Lincolnshire, and he's lived there for 18 years. His background is as an IT instructor in the civil service, but obviously he found the civil service frustrating, and then he left, very unusual career move, to be a long distance truck driver. So I think you can safely say that Ken has lived both lives, both sides of the reality world. So he spent 18 years now, more or less the whole time that he's been at Tallington, halfway along the Stamford Canal, as you can see, researching and bringing together all that seems to be known, currently known, about the Stamford Canal. So without more ado, I'll hand over to Ken to give us his thoughts and information on the Stamford Canal. Ken.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us. I didn't expect this when I made an application to the Lincolnshire branch to recognise this canal. And I do have to correct a little bit that I put in my précis. I said that it was Lincolnshire's forgotten waterway. We need to correct it. It is England's forgotten waterway. And that is why I'm going to be speaking to you tonight and asking you to be ambassadors for us to correct the history. So if we go to the screen, I live just where the hand is between the Stanford and Market Deeping on the canal. The blue line going north is the River Welland, and it goes out to the Wash. The large ship on the right-hand side is a seagoing boat that went from Newcastle down to London and popped into Fosdiq, and if the tide was right, down into Spalding to drop off coal before continuing its journey around the coast. From Fosdiq or Spalding, these small lighters, narrowboats, barges were either floated or with horses, or on the wider parts of the River Welland, the lead boat was a sailing vessel. Either way, it started in the 1670s and continued to 1863. So it's a good period. So without any more ado, I'll start the presentation. Just to explain the background of why I'm angry at history, and then to show how you can help. You all know what a canal is, but there were people that tried to say this wasn't. They tried to make out that this was a navigation from start to finish. So we need to look at the facts. I've said it's the earliest proper canal in England, but they said, well, what is a canal? An artificial waterway constructed to allow the passage of boats inland. Yes, by definition, no problem. A canal is a man-made waterway that allows boats to pass from one body of water to another, implying that they are different waters at each end. And that is how we got forgotten. They thought we went from the River Welland to the River Welland, but they didn't know that was not the truth. A little bit of history, which I won't go into too much, but just say that in 1563, the Exeter Canal, they had a wharf that they wanted to unload boats in. And when the tide came in, it was good. If they were quick, they could unload it and then it would catch the tide going out. By putting a simple single double gate further down the river, they were able to stop the water going out so that it kept the water in so that they could unload and reload boats. And that was, in reality, a canal of sorts, except that it was the same river, the Exe, and it wasn't going anywhere except to the docks and back. This is where history came in. They recorded that in the 1560s. And then in the 1760s, the Bridgewater Canal, and this is from their own write-up, they said it was England's first canal, opened on 17th of July, 1761. First canal in Britain to be built without following an existing watercourse, and was the forerunner of modern canals. However, it went across country from the pits, from one watercourse, straight sidewards to the docks on another watercourse. So both ends were at the same height above sea level, needing no locks. Other locks were built many years later to transport it further, but the basic Bridgewater Canal was just a straight cross-country channel. So where did the Stamford Canal fit in? Start with, why was it needed? The Nene and the River Welland, for those purists in Peterborough, the Nen, it had always been navigable to the North Sea via the Wash. The mills were built alongside the river, and they wanted weirs to keep a headwater for the mills. So they blocked the normal flow of the rivers. The roads were poor, trade suffered. Stamford Canal, the councillors petitioned for a solution, and in the 1500s, but by 1662, a town councillor, Daniel Wigmore, agreed to complete the project for £5,000, which he did by 1670. To finance it, he was allowed to charge 3p a tonne at each lock to cover maintenance and wages. From 1670 to 1855, 185 years, it made a living for him and his descendants, allowing coal mainly to get to Stanford and other villages along the way, and produce to get downriver and off to market. Lots of other things came in apart from coal, and there are huge shopping lists available that you could order and request from London, from abroad, from Newcastle, anywhere in the world you could request things, and the free marketers in Spalding would source it and then send it upriver for them. Like everywhere else where canals are, the mid-1800s saw the rise of the railways, which were able to transport goods faster and cheaper. Trade dwindled, costs rose, and canal became silted up. For a short time, canal and rail companies cooperated as far as the new rail line, but even that stopped in the 1850s. Ours was lucky here, because we got better coal coming down from Newcastle. They were actually unloading it from the canal barges, lifting it up onto the railway, taking it into the sidings and put it on trains on the East Coast Main Line. And that happened for 10 to 12 years before the Midland lines were able to bring coal across country. At the end, the route of the canal was parcelled up, attempt was made to auction it, but landowners were annoyed and took their part back. They hadn't been paid for it originally, which has turned out to be lucky for us, that quite a few parts are still visible, and we were able to go and see them. And if you come across, I'm more than willing to show you where the parts are that's visible. The chances of the Stamford Canal being resurrected, as many others have, especially like at our local canal at, anywhere north of here, is an anathema. I'll remember it in a minute. It's very slim unless I win the lottery. Nobody else seems to be interested in it. But this is where you come in. I want you to be ambassadors for us. Remember, it's the Grantham Canal. Sorry for Grantham. So this is where you come in. We need people to understand what it is, where it is, and why it is. I'm going to end there because I've just raised points that you may wish to comment on, and questions you may wish to raise. I can see lots of statements and questions on my screen. The main thing is, because I've had 18 years to do the research, I've created a website. After we've spoken about the few questions, I'll show you where you can find all of the answers you could possibly want. Thank you.
Okay, thanks Ken for that very brief, relatively brief history lesson. I'm be very surprised if there aren't some challenges to your assertion that it's one of the earliest canals, earlier than the Bridgewater. Of course, in Lincolnshire, we also have the well-known assertion that the Fosdiq Canal was a Roman canal. Indeed, there are people who believe that the Cardyke was a Roman canal, although that is becoming increasingly challenged these days. But in terms of a canal that was cut as a channel, I can't see anything to challenge what you're saying. The Fosdiq Canal is in fact a river that was straightened in various stages over its life. So it falls into that similar category to other river navigation, really, although it is called a canal. So we've got some questions. So the first one is, how much of the canal, is any of the canal still in water, Ken?
There are several parts, mainly to the between Market Deeping and the next mill, that still have water and still look like canals. We have lots of swans on them and they enjoy the area. Other than that, there are one or two locks about, but that's the only area that's really in water.
Okay, and next question is from Cambridge. This is someone who has a 60-foot narrowboat in the Cambridge area, who's currently at Chesterfield, having crossed from Denver to Boston. Could there be a link to the Trent? Well, yes, I'll answer this. I don't think there's ever envisaged a direct link from Stamford to the Trent. That would be quite a long, difficult way to go. But the Boston to Peterborough wetland corridor, when it is completed, will provide a link to the Trent via end on with the Welland to where the Stamford Canal joins the Welland, just north of Peterborough, back down through Spalding, and then across the Fens to Boston without going out onto the Trent. That's quite a long-term project, but that would be the route for a link to the Trent.
Could I just add something there, David?
Yep.
My brother bought a broadbeam barge off the Welland Inland Drainage Board. It was on the bank at Surfleet Sea's End. He wanted to take it to the Trent Mersey Canal. So he cut the bottom off it because it was completely rotten. He welded a new base in. He put an engine in, and at the next high tide, pushed it into the Welland, went down on the tide, out into the wash, waited on a sandbank for the tide to turn, went up the Witham, through Lincoln, onto the Trent, floated it up the Trent to Swarkston, and it is now a houseboat there. There is a route if you're determined and if you're willing to go out to sea in a narrowboat.
Yeah, I took the question from Charlie Platten to mean that he'd done that and he would rather go inland to the Trent
You're
rather
right.
than out through the Wash.
It was a hairy way of doing it.
Yeah, well, I've got several people on here who've been across the Wash on their narrowboats or done this, and it certainly can be done, but you know have to be very aware of the weather conditions and your boat and everything else and pilots. It's not for everybody.
It was better for him because it was a broad beam, not a narrow beam.
Yeah. Next question is, would we need to resurrect the Stamford Canal to get to Stamford, or would it be practical to canalise the higher reaches of the Welland?
The higher reaches of the Welland are not in sufficient water at most of the time. Rutland water takes it's piped into that to keep the reservoir full. The lower reaches from where the cross-country route is going to go to try to get to Peterborough, there is an arm that will go to Deeping St James with a tiny amount of work. There are two locks. One lock needs reconstructing, one lock needs new gates, and they could get into Market Deeping without any problem. That is the canalised part of the river. To get through the next lock, to get onto the Stamford Canal proper, would take money.
The other route could be to use part of the Maxi cut, which also takes the floodwater to bypass Market Deeping, but it isn't built as a navigation, and it doesn't run at a very high level apart from when it floods.
That's correct, because that is exactly what it is, a flood channel. I would want to use the part, there is a major weir at Tallington, so I would want to use part of that maxi cut to go round the two houses that have been built on the route of the old canal. So by using the maxi cut for about half a mile, we could divert round and get back onto the old route without a problem.
Okay, and a very good question from Rebecca saying, asking about getting canoe clubs and canoe and paddlers to spread the word and to use the waterway. As it stands at the moment, on the Environment Agency are technically the navigation authority, and they do recognise that there is a navigation right to Stanford, which is available to light craft and canoes, obviously with portage at the locks. That presupposes that there is enough water in the Stamford Canal to actually float a canoe as well. Or you could answer a query from me on this, Ken. Or do you think that the EA mean that they can navigate the river rather than the canal?
The navigable parts from Stamford town centre to Market Deeping are all open via the river with portage at the various places, and we have many canoe users on a regular basis during the summer up and down the river. They do not use the maxi cut beyond Tallington.
Right. I hope that's clarified that for the paddlers, and certainly it's in the current climate, we've all noticed a lot more people getting out onto the waterways in all sorts of craft. Canoes have always been there, but there's been a lot more canoeing this summer, which is great because it gets more people interested in the waterway and how good it is to be out on water. Quite a few of us in this, in the IWA and other canal organisations, canal and river organisations, have got our love of waterways from canoeing. I certainly did. And so I think we should, generally encourage that very much. Another question from Robin: are there any remains of a wharf in Stamford?
At Wharf Road, there is the actual wharf building still alongside the town bridge. And if you look at the side of it, you can see where the pit props used to go into the side of the wall so that the boats could pull up alongside and unload direct into the back of the building and then out onto the road in the front. The coal wharfs are still there. They're green areas for 100, 150 meters to the side of the river. So that's on the town side of the River Welland. On the far side, there were private wharves for Burley House. And there were some nice, nasty signs saying, keep off. This is for our own boats only. They didn't like the hoi polloi on the other side of the river.
Okay, and a question from Ivan Kane, Wilderness Trail boater from Norfolk, asking about getting into the, I've tried to get into the Welland up to Low Lock, but shoaling at the junction prevented several attempts. Not quite clear, and the question really is, do any larger boats ever get up as far as Low Lock or Deeping St James?
The only way there is at a good flow of water. The Low Lock doesn't exist now. It's alongside the weir, and if they don't let much water down the river, it all depends on 3 sluices at Tallington, the dividing up of the available water to keep them in a flowing condition rather than stagnating. So there's 3 fingers of water sharing the same amount that it actually comes out towards Low Lock. But if they're not allowing much out of Rutland water in any case, if they're storing it up there, then the access from the River Welland proper beyond the Maxi Inlet can get very dry.
Okay, the other thing I just pick up on is that in surveying the route for the Boston to Peterborough wetland corridor, Chris Howes, my colleague from Peterborough branch, we did establish, as did the Tuesday Night Club that used to write in one of the canal magazines, that at Peakirk, the River Welland still makes a level with Maxi Cut, the start of the rest of the River Welland, and indeed that end of the Stamford Canal. So it is all on a level at a place called Peakirk most of the time, except there's some downward pointing doors that point towards the sea, which close when the River Welland is higher, nearer to the sea. So that isn't such a big job to make that bit navigable. At the moment, you can't get through the pointing doors with any size of boat, because any large size of boat, because of a superstructure over the top of the pointing doors. But it does at least make a level with Folly River, with the Maxi Cut, with the Upper Welland, and with the Cardyke. So that's where we're very enthusiastic about that as a connection. I think that's answered all the questions that were, oh, just a minute, one more. How many major obstructions are in the way? This is from Michael, apart from the houses you mentioned, Ken.
Really, it's in effect 2 roads. There's the King Street in West Deeping that will need a bridge reinstating. There's Mill Lane and Bainton Road in Tallington, where they would need some sort of humpback bridge, but done carefully and sympathetically, because you would be recutting the bed of the canal. Instead of going down a level of 2 foot at Tallington, it could go down 4 foot, and you could go under so that the road surface could be fairly flat. Apart from that, most of the infrastructure is still there.
Okay, we're going to hand back now to Ken on a formal basis. There'll be more opportunities to ask any final questions at the end. Ken is now going to tell you a lot more about the canal and possibly re-emphasize some of the answers that have already been given to the questions. And he's going to do this by running through the website, which is where it's all recorded and referenced. And if I tell you that this website has 200 pages, you can see that we're not going to cover it all. But Ken will pick out some ways to help you navigate it and answer your interest or develop your interest as we go further. So back to you, Ken, for your second part of your presentation.
Thank you, David. And yes, this is your homework, everyone. Just see how many pages you can get through. Hopefully on the screen, you'll see the first bit of information. I was one of the editors of the original and only book about this, the Stamford Canal. I was brought on because of my expertise before it went to publish the first time. Unfortunately, I'd already found out lots of things and corrected them in the draft document, but it never got to publish. And despite promises that there would be later versions, the only thing that ever got republished was version 1. With everything that I found and others had found over the years and searching through all of the archives at Stanford Town Centre, Town Hall, I realised a book would never be satisfactory. It would always be out of date. With technology being available, a website that I had total control over, I could add anything and everything in the right place at the right time for the right reason. But not only that, along with every link to the source of that information, so that any academic that went into this website could check, double check, cross check, and come up with their own opinion of who was telling the truth, why, and who was making a few bob on the side and would rather not let others know about it. Everything is in this website. Everything that you see on the screen is there. Anything that isn't, that you know about, I would like to know, and I will put it in and cross-reference it. I'm just going to scan down the right-hand side of the major menu items. It's history, various options, the route, all of the locks, where it was going to and why, the final days, what happened afterwards, the references, the acknowledgements to everybody, all of the societies, anybody that ever had anything to do with this that I found out about and borrowed their information, I have recorded. I will now show you what David has just mentioned, the website help. Please start with this. It gives you the basic grounding of how to navigate round. The whole website has been built as a presentation. It's there for the young, for schools. It's there for the elderly and those academics. So it is both pictorial and textual in its simplest form. If ever you see the word more, it goes into hyperdrive. There is lots more, and you can learn more at your leisure. Please take your time and try and understand it. And if you find I've got anything wrong, let me know as soon as possible. At the bottom, you'll see two words, general structure and website plan. The general structure is what I print out for talks I give to the general public. It helps them understand what it is that they're going to see when they get home. This is what they're going to see, and this is what it is. Website plan. There you can see that's in this website. It's all cross-referenced. So if ever you find yourself lost, go to there. I said about it being pictorially, visually. So we'll go to that route and we'll go through from Stanford all the way to the sea by clicking on Lock 1. There is a textual explanation. Although the lock, top lock, is the start of the canal, it wasn't the head of the navigation. The head of the navigation was the Wharf Road and the bridge in Stanford, which was still another mile further away. So the last part of the navigation was on the river. You can see this word more, which I won't click, but I will click on the plan view. You'll notice these arrows either side, they go up and down the canal. So if we go to the plan view, you can see here is the head of navigation in Stanford, and here is the first lock at Huds Mill. If we click on the arrow, there is that lock, and this is where all of the confusion was caused. There wasn't sufficient water coming through the lock to provide any water in this section here. This lock was put in at the side of the mill, but the weir was already here upstream. So the force of water went across to the south of the mill. The mill race wanted the water as much as possible. So the amount that went into the lock was just sufficient to fill the lock. There was no lock race to go around it, a sluice or anything, because all of the water went round on the south side. So how did this section get any water? This is where the Stamford Canal becomes a canal. This River Gwash is the outlet from Rutland Water. Obviously, Rutland Water is a water course, but the River Gwash was originally there in any case. Its force of water came down here, and they put a weir across. So the water was diverted in a T shape, backfilling this at, on a level, but also forcing water down the route of the canal. This was actually flowing water, not like you normally have in canals nowadays, where the water is quite static. In fact, in the next village down, they called it the Boaty River because it was flowing water. It was the River Gwash, and at times that could be quite powerful. The route went through the back of Uffington Park, missing out Uffington, so they couldn't get any benefit from coal. But we did find an enterprising little person who'd set up a little hut down in this corner here and was unloading coal off barges. People were coming down, taking the coal, walking back uphill for the houses in Uffington. Going on, we've got a private school and a farm, Copt Hill Farm. The Teasdales that own both welcomed me with open arms and gave me a lot of history. They'd not only seen and helped fill in some of these locks here, but also they backfilled the bridge here. So the whole of this bridge that's under this road is able to be dug out. So there is no work needed there to be able to reinstate this. This is Copt Hill, and hills by definition needed locks. So they came down to lock 2, they came down to lock 3, ran along. Then they had a problem. This is a floodplain and the river Welland split into 3. So they went inland and put a lock here, which they also used because it was the time of the turnpikes to take tolls off traders that were going up and down the road, as well as from the canal owners. The canal hugged the road. Here's the river in its various stages. And we've just mentioned about the Maxi Cut, and this is that section there. But the canal goes inland. This is where I live. This is where I overlook this lock. And we'll come back to this in a minute. The next one, unfortunately, is where we're going to have major problems. This is the East Coast Main Line. And whilst it was 3 tracks, 2 running tracks and a siding, it was okay. The lock was available. When they widened it in 1905, they covered this with gravel. So it is now 4 tracks wide, 4 running tracks, so there is a problem. I am certain, and I know that there is a lock still underneath the gravel and the tunnel is still under there. So it's just a case of digging it out. Into West Deeping is where it starts getting interesting. This lock here is still in situ. It's still, the majority of it's available to see. It's in a private garden at the back of the old parsonage behind the church. He only lets people in that are really interested once or twice a year by invitation. This is where we would need a new bridge. It's the King Street going from London to Lincoln, Old Roman Road. And that's where we would have a problem to put this back into water. Around via this, which was in the middle of the field. And then on to Molesey Mill. This area here that you can see in blue at the top is all in water. And it is very interesting and nice to see. And even this bypass that's been built across the A15, I'm fairly certain there's sufficient clearance underneath for narrowboats. But either way, we would be in control of the depth that we dropped from Molesey Mill across here to the next one, so we could cut it lower if necessary. This is the last real lock on the canal at Thorpe's Mill. Here is the River Welland just below it, and you'll see here it comes back in and then goes to Town Bridge in Market Deeping. So from the bottom of this lock, we're on the river proper. Come down the High Street, and this is Briggins Lock or High Lock, which is completely there. It just wants new lock gates dropping in, and that will be fully functional. It is solid rock both sides and available. Coming down a bit further, twist and turned, we get to what is called Low Lock. We couldn't find it. No one could find it. The river hits a sluice there, goes round and continues. It's only when we found old photographs that we realized this lock had just been a bypass to that weir. So by reinstating that, we will get navigation back. This is where we're talking about the navigable area up to now. This is the River Welland. This is the Maxi Cut. This is where there are probably sluice gates, but this is fully navigable up to this point and would be from narrowboats up to the bottom of Low Lock. We're getting wider and wider, and you know, this is 50 meters wide. It's a good flat navigable river up to Crowland. And this is where they're probably going to come down and use the car dike to get across to Peterborough. At a bit more scale, we've just from here, it goes up through the centre of Spalding, and this is where the majority of goods were transferred, either from large boats to the small ones or from the small boats to the large ones. If possible, they wanted to bring them out as far as Fosdiq. This area is where all of the boat owners actually lived. They were experienced wash boatmen. They knew what the tides were, and they met boats coming in and transferred goods there if possible. If it was in sufficient spate, they would bring them up to Spalding, park them there and unload them. Otherwise, there was a ferry service backwards and forwards here to bring the coal or whatever in, depending on the height of tide. I mentioned about my brother going out onto the sandbanks. He picked up the boat here at Surfleet Sea's End, took it out here, waited here, and then floated it back up here through Boston and onto Lincoln and onto the Trent. This is where it is as a global picture. The boats were going up and down, up and down, up and down the coast, mainly from Newcastle with coal going to London, and they would drop it off in the wash and it would be brought up into Stanford. 3,000 tons a year were brought up the Stamford Canal from Newcastle for 180 years. There was a tremendous amount of trade. It just wasn't inland and it wasn't recorded. The history writers didn't see it. It just happened. I did say I would, let me just, yes. If we go back to the route, I did say I'd say a little bit more about Tallington. This lock here. If we go back to the text view, this is where the moor comes in. Instead of going left, right, as these two arrows show, in a presentation manner, moor goes into a vertical paged mode. This is what the boatmen would see as they came towards Tallington. We'd be standing where on the canal, they'd be able to see the church. They weren't interested in the church. They were interested in that white building. That was the pub. The ale house, the crooked billet. This is the front of it, which none of them ever saw. They only saw the window at the back, and they got their ale from there. This is where we all came in. This lock wall wasn't known about. It was in a tip. It was at the side of a car park, and this rock that's on the top was hit by a JCB and lifted up and dumped there. Only years later was this excavated, and it was found that it was the lock, the top buttress of the lock, and here is where the lock gate fitted in and went back. I have done a little bit of work. That's a really rough picture. This is how it is now. In our local paper, these pictures appeared. I've done a mural. It's 32 foot wide, it's 8 foot high, and it sits in the lock. This is that stonework that you can see there. It shows people what the lock looked like. It bent round the corner as it went to the road. Cocktail is in the back where there are other locks. There were only two barges floating in this part of the canal. all of the others, there were 4 in the original to start with, they're all being used where you're standing to the south of, to the east of the Tallington Lock, servicing the villages along the way. It was very easy for the horses because that water is flowing towards us. But the problem is, once this gate closed, where does the water go? It went through a sluice just here, and it went down across, I'm going to say it now, through our garden, round the corner, down a sluice, and to the river. So any force of water coming at us that couldn't go through the lock, it diverted back into the river without a problem. How do we know? These are the old drawings. Here is that canal coming down. Here is that lock gate. The bottom lock gate is there. And this is where I live. And this is where the water went, and down here and back into the old River Welland. The thing about this picture is that everyone has assumed they knew what a canal was, and they knew what the locks were, and it was everything that we know nowadays. But I got this picture from Kew when I went down to do some research, and there we could blow it up, and you'll see a little black mark just there. There's another one just here, just off the picture. And when we zoomed in, we found there's an ordinary lock, double lock gates there, and this is a flash lock, purely because this road here never had a bridge. So to stop water, to allow carts to go by, they used to put the sleepers in a stack just there to stop water going. And then when they were ready to let the boats go through, they whipped them out, water flowed across the road, and once the boats had gone by, they put them back in. So this was a combined ordinary standard lock and a flash lock. Here it shows where it was running to, and if I just scroll up a tiny touch, this piece here is this piece here. You'll see this little cut. What happened was the boats came along here from Lock 6, went past a coal wharf, and whilst waiting for the next lock to be prepared, the rearmost barge will be unhooked. It would turn in the turning circle here by flowing water, backing into there. It would face downstream and float into the wharf here. Without any intervention, it would just be stopped and kept there. So the two would continue on and go through the next lock. Remember, it was 3p a ton per lock. So they didn't want to take too much upstream if they didn't have to. They brought it through Lock 6 and they dropped off at the coal wharf. And that can still be seen when the water or the snow is in the right place, it's still there and visible. This was the sale of the area, and the sale documents helped tell us more. They said about the plan of the sale of plot 9, the reading room. And the reading room was this one here, which is where the coal wharf was. And when they used the names, we thought, hang on, Ellis and Everard, the coal merchants, yes, they were here. But when the railway came, which is here, the Great Northern Railway, they moved their operations from here up the road into the side of, and used the wharves at the side of the goods yard in Tallington, and that's where Ellis and Everard started to go nationwide with delivering coal, purely from the canal from the 1670s to the railway in the 1850s and then onwards. They explain in here, here's Ellis and Everard's tenant. This is the sale document. So we've got all of the facts that we needed to be able to explain it. And that was just here. And just here, you can see the other flash lock that I mentioned, because the mill lane here going down to Tallington Mill, they needed to stop the water when carts went by. So they used a flash lock there. And then this is lock 6, which is where the railway is. And these are all of the old drawings that we found at Kew. This explains it a little bit more in pictorial format. There's the lock. Here's the bridge. Boats would come along here. But if you look at the railway, there's a siding there with a spur. And that's as far as it goes. Yes, they put a crane on there, on the spur, and they didn't steal. They bought, here's the crane. They bought coal from the boats and brought it up here and put it into Tallington Station goods yard. They offered to put this T-bar junction in an extension for unloading coal to the canal in 1853 because they wanted more coal and more cranes, and it was easier to unload them sidewards than from here endwards on. So that is what happens in Tallington. And I'm going to say now, if we go to the side, you can see more text. If we go back, you can see more text. Ad infinitum, you can learn visually or textually on a single click of a button. Enjoy. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Ken. That's a very thorough taster. I was going to say teaching, but it's certainly not a teaching because there's so much more to know. And I see there's some more questions down at the bottom. I'll just get to them in a minute. But just commenting that I think what's reignited or stoked up, shall we say, I don't know about reignited, encouraged Ken's enthusiasm was the fact that when the Boston to Peterborough wetland corridor comes to fruition, it will greatly increase the traffic on the River Welland up to Peakirk, where it joins this potential restored navigation. And it would definitely add to the experience and the offering to be able to go to Stamford, which, in case you're not aware, is a very, very nice town. Oozing wealth, by the way, probably going right the way back to when it got all those fancy goods coming up the canal before anybody anywhere else got them. And Stamford itself is well worth a visit, just a detour off the A1. If you've got any time to spare, you'll find shops and things there that you don't find many other places. So now it's general questions, final questions really, and I'll just, this is a question from the East Anglian Waterways Association, or a comment, but fascinating pictures taken by Steve Machin when you took him for a walk along the canal. Do you still give guided tours, Ken?
I will. Obviously, some of the places that we wanted to get in, take time to arrange, but I'm more than willing to arrange talks and meet people locally once COVID's over, and we can go. I'm going to be designing walks to go to that we can go, hop from car to car and up and down and along. But I'm more than willing to help anybody else, if they want to plan a route through.
I think I saw somewhere, and I couldn't find it again, a reference to a walks along the Stamford Canal. Am I imagining that, or is there a document?
There are walks along the Stamford Canal organised by the tourist board in Stanford, which sort of picks and chooses bits and pieces. Unfortunately, they're led by an enthusiast that has sort of got a script, but they've not got the benefit of the amount of information that's available that could round off the talks better. So it depends who you speak to, what you could see and how much you can see.
I see that's organised walks. It's not a help yourself canal walk.
No, they're normally organised walks. Yes.
All right. Okay. And a question again from Ivan Kane about he's particularly interested in flash locks. Can you tell us more about the flash lock operation below Lock 5? And are there any remains?
There's no remains, but if you go onto the website and look at locks per se, you'll see what they look like and how they were constructed. But if you come to Tallington, we can show you where they were.
And then we have a question, what are the dimensions of the locks? I rather guessed that they were wide beam locks of the normal size of boats that navigated the northeast waterways when they could. So I'm assuming they're wide locks, but do you specifically know the dimensions of the locks, Ken?
They're 7 foot wide.
Oh, that's a narrow lock then.
Right.
Have you any support awareness? This is from Robin Chandler. Any support awareness publicity from the railway? Have you had any from the Railway and Canal Historical Society?
None whatsoever.
Sounds like another talk that you could give, Ken.
Thank you, David.
Yes. I have spoken to a Railway and Canal Historical Society in the Derby area. I'm sure there must be one in the Peterborough area with the history of railways in that area, Peterborough and Stamford and the great, the East Coast Main Line. I'm sure there must be one there. So maybe need to put the two together. And another question: can you see much if you cycle from Stamford to Deeping? Can you see much of the canal?
No. Only from Molesey Mill to Market Deeping, you can see the canal. You think it could take boats in water alongside, but everywhere else, you've really got to know what you're looking for and know where to look to find any traces of that. The interesting area is West Deeping, where they have a very active heritage society, and they had all of the documentation they wanted and needed to rough out the history of what was in the village, except that they looked at it, I'll say in plan view, exactly as they were given it, and made assumptions. They got written reports as well, and they made assumptions. It wasn't until we started to turn some of the pictures round and orientated them correctly, things started to fall into place, and there was a far bigger picture, and there was a huge wharfage area in West Deeping that no one knew about. And all of this, when you stand back and look at it now, you can see it if you know what you're looking for. It's fascinating.
Okay, well, I think we'll draw it to a close there. We've been going for just over, well, pretty much spot on an hour, actually, given a bit of delay from the start. And I'd like to thank Ken enormously for coming forward with his enthusiasm, his wealth of knowledge and information. And of course, he's very modest and is the first to acknowledge that he doesn't know everything because they're still learning new things. But I'm sure that Ken knows as much as anybody else does. So probably no one knows more, but he knows he doesn't know everything.
Just on that point, David, that's why I want to talk to everybody. I want everybody else to understand there is more to know. More should be known. The history books are wrong. Please tell people when you see this on the television screens and people talking about canals, no, Stanford was the first. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ken. That's great. Thanks everybody for attending, and look forward to seeing you all in the Stamford area someday, and make sure you get through to Ken. Thank you very much and good night.